One of the questions I get asked a lot is how to design foundation paper piecing. So I thought I would just do like a quick, at home, how can you do it at home if you were just wanting to design something simple, not too complex. So one of the things that I would suggest is print out the image. I'm just using a really simple, heart. I'm not going to go crazy detailed or anything, but I'm just going to show you like kind of the general way of how to do foundation paper piecing, especially if you have a piece of paper or your image or whatever. So there's a few ways you can do this. You can print the image onto a piece of paper and then trace over it. You can trace on the paper. It doesn't matter how you do it. You just need the image, and then you need to decide whether you want to trace on top of it or if you want to trace on the actual image. You can use a light box as well. If your image is like really detailed and you're trying to get all the details, you can put a light box underneath and do it that way. In the beginning, when I first started, I used a window and some sunlight and taped it to the window and just sat there and did it that way. So what you'll need is you'll need your picture or your image. I'm just using a simple heart so I can show you quickly. You'll need obviously a pencil. You'll need a ruler of some sort. Obviously I'm just going to use this guy because I have it, and we all have those kinds of rulers around. You can use like a translucent paper, a tracing paper. I have this like higher quality stuff for when I was doing this because I wanted it to be a lot more sturdy than tracing paper, which I tore a lot. This stuff was a little bit stronger, so when I was stitching through it, it wasn't as much of a challenge if I needed to rip stitches back out, which in the beginning I was doing quite a lot. So I bought like a stronger paper, but you can honestly just do this right on top of regular paper, and I'll show you how you can do that. Okay, so what you'll need to do is just kind of find either, since I'm using an image that is identical on both sides, right? It's symmetrical in one way or another. I can actually just find the point of symmetry and then draw a line because I know that this side is going to be the same as this side. So I actually could just do this side and then just copy it in a mirror image and then do that. So I only had to do one side. But if you were doing like a circle, obviously you would just do the whole circle. You wouldn't divide it into half unless you wanted to. So one of the things that I try to do is look for like harsh points where I know I'm going to have to do like a transition where my fabric, like if it's laying, I can't really just put another piece on top and it'll flip over without the seams opening and being, raw. So I look for those points, which here it would be because you would put, a piece of fabric and then you would push it back or push it that way. But then when you went to go put this on, you would still have like a raw edge down here. So there wouldn't be a way to like cover it. So once you've kind of like identified those points, then you can kind of know that I've got to put like a section there. So this would be section A and then this would be section B. So I noticed that, okay, this is probably one of the points where, if I'm pushing fabric one way or another and I'm pushing fabric that way and this way, I'm going to have a raw edge somewhere. So I need to divide the sections so that later on when I put them together, I won't have any raw edges. So that's kind of what you're looking for in the beginning, is just where can I divide it up to make the sections. Now, if you're working, say, with a circle, you're not going to have any sections. You can just go all the way around. So there are images that you may use that won't have, 3 or 4 sections or whatever. This one obviously is going to need 2 sections. So I'm going to take my first line and just draw a line right down the center. And then from there, you're just going to look at how can I make straight lines that, continuously go to the edge of the block. So say if this is my block, right? How am I going to make some straight lines to make the curve? So I typically start with where is the longest straight line that I can draw. So if this is one section and this is one section, I'm going to start with probably this one because it is like the longest line, right? Because this is a curve, so I'm not, that's going to be a lot of small curves or small lines. So I usually try to find the straightest line and go from there. So now we're looking at, this is my section line. So I've now divided my heart into two sections, so A and B. And then I'm going to draw my first line, and I'm going to start from the seam or the edge and go all the way up to the end of my block, going along one of the lines of the design. And I'm going to try and just cover as much of that design that I have. And so when you're looking at it, you're like, okay, if I put a piece of fabric here and I open it here, I've now created one line where the fabric is here and the fabric is now here, and I've got a nice clean edge, right? So then you're going to continue on. And typically when I'm making my lines, I'm usually doing it in the reverse of what I would sew it. So this would probably be my last piece that I'm sewing on. So I'm going to go this way, and this would probably be the first and then second. So you're actually kind of working in reverse. So you need to kind of almost plan ahead in a sense, but you'll kind of understand it once you're done. You'll kind of see what I'm talking about. But then what I do is I'm looking at, okay, where's the next intersection? So I've got a fabric piece here, and then this would be fabric here. So the line connects here. So I want to start my next piece at that junction so that we don't have any open or weird angles. So I'm looking at, okay, this is the line. So I'm going to start here and then continue out from there. So again, starting where they connect, making a straight line. This is where the ruler kind of comes in handy because it's kind of guiding you to show you where your lines are going to start and stop in a sense. So I've got it here as the junction, and I'm just going to kind of pull my ruler left or right to kind of get as straight of a line as I can, and then just draw your line. And you're going to stop at that junction because your fabric is already going to be here, so your fabric's going to be there. So we're covering up all those raw edges. So we're not going to continue past it because then we're going to have an extra section that we don't need. So then you're just going to slowly continue, again, finding where you've put the junction, where the two pieces meet, where you've drawn your line and where the design is. Then put your ruler down and get a straight edge, and then draw your line. And then continue as you go, drawing those lines. And I'm just using my ruler as kind of like a guide to kind of give me as much straight edge as I can, so I'm not doing a ton of tiny, tiny little pieces. And yeah, your heart's going to be a little bit more, you know, jagged looking, but it's not, it's still going to look curved once it's done because it's fabric and it'll look curved. And you can do as many lines or as little lines as you want. So if you wanted it to be super, super detailed, you would just put a ton of lines in and just make it super, super detailed. So there we go. So as you can see, so we've got this piece here, right? So this would be our first big piece because we would be putting that main fabric here, and then all of these are going to be the pieces that you add onto it. So this would be our first piece. So then our second piece would be the one that goes here, right? Because we're going to open it and it's going to go here. So all I keep thinking is, if this is the spine of my book, I want the pages to open, right? So this would be 2, and then this would be my new spine of the book, and then I would open. So this would be 3. And the only raw edges you have would be here and here. So you're going to want to cover it. So again, you'll go from there to there. That would be 4. And then again, raw edge there, raw edge here. So we're going to go 5 and then continue on 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now, you could do this on the other side. Again, mine is a symmetrical image. So I really could just scan this into my, computer and then just mirror image and print 2. And then I would just have the 2 images that are symmetrical. But you can also just sit here and do the ruler again, drawing all your lines, and then so on and so forth. Now, when you go to like cut these apart, so you would cut this down the center to give you section A and section B. And when you do that with pieces of paper like this, there's no seam allowance added on. So typically when I do it like this, I would take this to my printer and copy it, scan it, copy it, and then, you know, have a second piece of paper that looks like this. And then I would cut it. But when I cut it, I would actually draw my seam allowance in. So I would draw the seam allowance. Oop. There we go. Like that. And then I would cut along this line right here. Okay, and then that way I would know that I would need a seam allowance along those edges. Then with my other piece of paper, because remember I made a copy, then I would take this side and do the same thing, draw the seam allowance on this side, and then cut it. So then I would have section A and then section B, or A and B, or however you want to do it. So I would actually add the seam allowance in just by copying the paper so that I had multiples of it, and then just trim it out. If you have something that's more complex, then you might want to think about doing tracing paper, because then you could draw this out, then copy those sections, and then take it and draw your seam allowance, then turn the tracing paper and then kind of draw another section, and then again go around it with your seam allowance. So that way you're utilizing a lot of the tracing paper. Whereas this is an easy design. I can just copy it, make two pieces, and then trim and make my seam allowance. So then when you would sew it, it would be just this piece. You would sew these pieces on, cut it so you have your seam allowance, do the same on this side, cut it so you have your seam allowance, and then sew the two pieces together. And when you sew, you're looking at these pieces and where those would join up. So that's kind of how I do drawing of a foundation paper piecing, from just, you know, a ruler, a piece of paper, and a pencil. So let me know if you guys have any questions.